Okay, let's get started. So hello everybody and welcome to our webinar titled Deliver New Customer Experiences Through AI-Enabled Chatbots. I'll be your host for today and moderator for the presentation. My name is Dan White. I'll start the presentation today. I'd also like to introduce Gareth Addison. Gareth works for Deloitte Digital. He's Director of Engineering. And we also have Alexander Fritz, who will be here. He's our Product Manager for Deloitte Digital as well. In terms of the agenda, we'll start by identifying the challenges for the financial services sector, and then I'll talk about some of the benefits of using AWS for financial services institutions. I'll also talk about some of the digital transformation activities that we see on AWS for the financial services sector. And then we'll hand over to Gareth and Alexander, and they'll talk about some of the work they've done on AWS developing chatbots with Deloitte. We'll have 15 minutes at the end for Q&A as well. In terms of the learning objectives, I hope that you'll learn more about the core benefits of using AWS, the digital transformation that's activities you can undertake on AWS in financial services specifically. And then learn more about a real use case, a real world example of developing chatbots on AWS with Deloitte. Okay, so let's start by talking about some of the challenges that we see in the financial services sector. So AWS, we have a dedicated FSI team. So I'll use that acronym FSI throughout this presentation. We spend a lot of time talking to our FSI customers around the world, and some of the common things that we hear, some of the common challenges, I'll talk about in a little bit more detail now. Firstly, regulatory oversight. So particularly since the financial crisis, there's an increasing amount of regulation and compliance requirements, and it continues to be a really significant expense driver for our customers. Competition as well. So particularly with the new fintech entrants, but also the traditional players who are looking to change and innovate, financial consumers have more choice really now than at any time in history. So it's particularly important for customers and providers to be able to differentiate themselves. Security. We see more and more security threats in the modern age. You'll have heard in the news about cyber criminal gangs. A new concept that's discussed is it's crime as a service, so providing criminals with the tools to hack, and also government-sponsored hackers. There's numerous sources now, and the rate of technological innovation as well makes it extremely difficult to keep up with those new security threats. In terms of data, we find that many firms are sitting on petabytes of data, either for compliance purposes or because they think that they can mine that data and maybe identify actionable information. So it's particularly important to be able to analyze that information and use it for your benefit. And we see the customers that really progress are those that use that data to make insights and improve their business. And cloud is the new normal. So conversations used to be about if a customer would move to the cloud. Now it's more about when you will move to the cloud. And resources are scarce as well. So as more and more enterprises make a move to the cloud, it's increasingly difficult to find the right people, the right skill sets to help you drive that change, especially in light of shrinking budgets and declining revenues. It's a real drain on resources. So this here is the financial services Borg cube. So if you're not familiar with Star Trek, this is an analogy for financial services institutions. The Borg spaceship was essentially a ship that grew organically over a long period of time with multiple different components that were bolted on as and when they were needed. And really, this is a good analogy for FSIs, particularly the traditional FSIs, in that they've been established for long periods of time, but they're built upon this monolithic architecture. And as new services and apps are released, such as CRM apps, for example, new retail apps, they're bolted onto this existing monolithic architecture. So it becomes increasingly complex. And this monolithic app has lots of challenges for an organization. Because of the complexity of that existing architecture, it's very expensive to run. Making changes is difficult because There are so many intertwined applications and relationships between those applications. And it's estimated that within our customers, nearly 2/3 of the IT budget is spent on simply keeping the operations running. In terms of cost reduction programs as well, their effectiveness is reduced because of this complexity. Changes tend to be made at the fringe because there's a lack of understanding of the entire architecture. And this really slows down innovation as well. Because of this tightly coupled architecture, it's very difficult to innovate because you're very much constrained by the existing relationships between the various components in that architecture. And in addition to that, there's regulatory requirements that need to be adhered to as well. So this complex legacy infrastructure, this technical debt, as we call it, it makes it extremely hard for financial services institutions to drive that digital transformation. And this is a survey that was conducted by McKinsey, and they found that financial services were perceived as the third least digital industry, trailed only by automotive and consumer goods. And this is really linked into that legacy architecture. Having said that, we have the fintechs, and here's some examples here on the slide. And you'll also see that AWS is commonly the first choice for fintech startups. These new born in the cloud organizations, they don't have any technical legacy technical debt, and they can completely start from fresh. And AWS provides that perfect platform because they can scale globally, they can deploy in minutes, and they can automate as much as possible to save manpower and to save costs. And I just want to show you a really good example of one such fintech. This is Monzo Bank. Monzo were founded in February 2015. Their architecture is built on AWS. They use microservices architecture. They received a full UK banking license from the FCA and PRA in April 2017. And they really differentiate from the others. And what they do is they make it extremely easy, a very easy customer experience. And they interact with their customers as well. So they allow customers to vote for features that they want to see in the app. So a really good example here of a fintech. But it's not only the startups. So we have many more established organizations who are using AWS to transform their business across banking, capital markets, and insurance. And you can see there's some really big names there. So how are these financials transforming their business with the cloud? We'll work through a few steps here. So primarily at the top, customers are able to eliminate that costly technical debt. They can reduce their overhead. So there's no need to procure a SAN. There's no need to buy additional servers when you have a new project. And you can reallocate your resources to the higher value projects much faster. And this links in with innovation as well. You can fail fast in this environment. You can spin up your environment for a quick project. If it doesn't work, you quickly shut that environment down. There's no real investment. It's access on demand. And you've also got access to innovation on the AWS platform. So if we look at the number of significant service releases in 2017, there were over 1,400. So it instantly gives you that integration with lots of different innovative services that are released on AWS. Thirdly, it's a great opportunity to find new sources of growth. So the cloud is a highly scalable infrastructure, and you can build analytics platforms. You can scale to huge amounts of analysis. You can use the analytics tools that are provided with AWS, and this really helps identify opportunities. So the customers, as mentioned earlier, that really undertake deep analytics and gain insights from their data, they're the customers that really progress and differentiate from the others. And lastly, you reduce risk as well. So you can address existing issues. You've got access to a wide range of tools from a security perspective. You're guaranteed on an AWS platform that you're using the latest technology to enhance your information security stance. And we'll just talk about this in a little bit more detail now. This is the AWS shared responsibility model for security. So if you look at everything below the grey dotted line, the foundation service of AWS, AWS is effectively responsible for the security of the cloud. So you inherit that secure infrastructure up to the instance level, and you inherit those compliance requirements up to that level. And then on top of that, the security in the cloud is a customer or partner's responsibility. But AWS also provide a wide range of tools to help you achieve that security as well. So if you think about things like encryption at rest, encryption in transit, etc., patching of your OS, data management and patching and protection as well. So how is the cloud enabling transformation and innovation in the industry? I'll give you a few examples here, working across from left to right. So left is more widespread, across to the right more innovative and more cutting edge. And we'll start to the left. So we've got grid computing. Bankinter, they're using grid computing on AWS to conduct a credit risk simulation. So they have to run this risk simulation on 5 million pieces of data, so for customers, and they brought the average time down from 23 hours to 20 minutes. So a massive impact there. If we look at agile data analytics, Aon, they turned to AWS to operate their hybrid architecture. They wanted to use this for financial simulation platform, and they used the GPU optimized instances on EC2. And they found on AWS, they were able to recalculate 5 million of their financial investment policies in a matter of minutes. And it previously took 8 hours, so it's an overnight process. So huge improvement there. If we look at the migration of core systems, FINRA moved about 75% of its operations to AWS. And they use AWS to analyze and store the influx of 75 billion records that are needed to detect, use analytics. And they estimated that they will save up to $20 million annually by using AWS. And then we think about blockchain as well, distributed ledger technology. We have more blockchain on AWS than any other cloud, including customers such as NASDAQ, BigChain, and Coinbase in the example there. And as we move to more cutting edge technology, we think about AI and machine learning. And we'll talk about some examples in the next slide. So in terms of AI and ML, a number of different use cases here, working across from left to right. Fraud.net is a great example. They're using AWS machine learning to help assist in the detection of financial crime. We've also got services like Transcribe and Comprehend that enable organizations to process and gain insights from vast amounts of documents in the financial services industry. And then we have recommendation engines. So if you think about customers that are logging in and seeing their patterns of behavior, you can automatically use machine learning algorithms to detect their behavior and recommend the product that is suitable for them. And then think about trading platforms as well. So it's essential to be able to analyze the sentiments of text and market analysis. And you could use Transcribe to do that. You could also use recognition for image analysis to get data and feed that into analytics systems that predict the behavior and the trends in the market as well. And lastly, it's all about the customer experience. So everything we do is geared towards improving that customer experience. And there's a real expectation from customers that they don't want to queue, they want things to be instantly available. And we can use machine learning to do that. And one of the great ways to do that would be to provide a chatbot. So when you log onto a website, you automatically have a text message that appears on the screen, and you can make commands and you can run your banking through voice-enabled apps as well. So it's a great use case. And this really leads into Deloitte here. I started working with Deloitte a year ago. They were working with the preview version of Lexx. They're one of our few strategic premier partners, and they did a fantastic job working directly with our product team. They worked with Lexx and developed a conversational banking solution in a matter of weeks. And I'm delighted to hand you over to Gareth and Alexander, who are going to talk in more detail about that now.
Great, thank you very much, Dan. So I think just coming off the back of what Dan just mentioned in terms of some of the innovation that's available in the marketplace due to some of the machine learning and AI type componentry, one of the key areas that we've been focusing on is how does that availability of technology help us with customer experience. There are other aspects of the benefits we'll talk to, but predominantly we'll be talking about customer experience and how that is translating to changes in customer experience and how we manage that via technologies or implementations such as chatbots themselves. So I think one of the observations that we've made is the way in which we as humans interact with digital services and devices today is becoming increasingly more conversational in its nature, and very much different to how we have been using user interfaces in the past in terms of point and click type rich interfaces. And this is really mirroring how we interact with our friends and communities through different types of communities and platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and various other chat type tools themselves. And this is really giving us a number of benefits, not only just on analytics, but also giving us the availability to drive cognitive engagement with customers. And I think for today, we'll be largely going to be talking about conversational UX in that context, and talking about how chatbots are allowing us to drive that level of cognitive engagement and interaction with customers. So looking at how some of this technology is impacting, or how different organizations are leveraging artificial intelligence, a lot of this is coming through, particularly in the areas that we work in, largely around FS, in terms of how we interact with consumers in terms of their digital interfaces. And this is, as I mentioned before, this is really happening at two levels. One is at a deep level in terms of machine learning and analytics, in terms of how can we learn from how customers are interacting with us as a business, and what customers' needs are, and how do we best meet them, but also how do we deliver that as part of a compelling customer experience that helps them move forward. So, and henceforth, talking today to you about chatbot technology and how that is becoming more pervasive in the market.
Cool, thanks, Gareth. I think I'm quite aware that we have a pretty diverse audience. So before we go into the actual nitty-gritty detail of AWS and the technology architecture, just want to provide sort of a common understanding of what we mean by a chatbot, really. Currently, if you want to acquire any information, you go onto a website, weather.com, you type in your postcode, you get the weather. The big difference here really is that now, instead, you just stay within the same app and you can acquire the same information, but via chatbot. So rather than closing the app down and opening a new one, you just stay within the same interface. And so really what that means over time is that we think chatbots will be replacing individual apps, which is pretty impactful thought about. What's interesting, though, is that chatbots per se are nothing really new. The first one was created in 1966 at MIT, so that's been a while. And yet we have seen quite a bit of progression and big advertisement efforts lately. If you think of Google Home and Amazon Alexa, big marketing campaigns. And that's just the voice-enabled side. There's also thousands of chatbots on Facebook and the like. And really, the sort of reason behind that is a pretty severe improvement in technology, artificial intelligence, and natural language processing. And what that means is that we are now able to speak more conversational with chatbots. So machine learning has become a big thing to improve the service. So when we say chatbots, in a nutshell, we mean some sort of service that is powered by some sort of rules or AI, and you can interact with a particular bot through sort of any messaging platform. That can be Facebook, that can also be alternative ones, Slack, text messages, and the like. Now, with every technology, new technology, comes a series of challenges, and the chatbot is certainly not different. So probably everyone who's tried one will notice that chatbots don't understand everything that you are saying. Very often there's misunderstandings, misinterpretations. And the reason is really because a language is extremely complicated. We as human beings are quite good at it, but it turns out when it comes to tech, it's a completely different story. So that's where natural language processing comes in, but it's certainly among the most difficult areas of artificial intelligence to crack. To be truly conversational, we need to understand or teach technology to understand allusions, hyperboles, connotations, context, sarcasm, and so on. Provide an example, because we are a financial services sector or audience today. Quick example could be, Gareth asked me to transfer £100 from my bank account for dinner last night. That's an easy one, I understand that. But for a computer, that's much more difficult. Different example, if you was using sarcasm and said, you should probably send me £100 for dinner last night, then that is a bit of a different intent already. And then another one would be context. So if I said, I need a coffee, that means I'm tired. But if I want a coffee, that's an order. If I want to have a coffee with someone, that means physical movement, and I would like to go to somewhere, i.e. to Starbucks. So the context, again, is very, very difficult to understand for a traditional chatbot. So to sum this up a little bit, is essentially where we think we sort of are, is we have chatbots that are functioning based on rules. Such bots are very limited. They understand very specific commands, right? So I made the example with weather. What's the weather tomorrow based on my location? That bot really is only as smart as it's programmed to be. The second sort of functionality or type of chatbot would be that is using machine learning, that is using artificial intelligence. And that is slowly where we're going towards to. And the bot, as a result, gets smarter as it learns from the conversations that it has with its users. So currently, I see ourselves a little bit between informational and transactional, but really where I'd like us to go is towards becoming an advisory chatbot for the users. Currently, it's decision trees, but soon, hopefully, it'll be a little bit smarter than that. The one thing that we do emphasize as a result of the limits of technology as of now is to really focus on your customer experience. Don't try to resolve 1,000 things at once, but rather deliver very, very simple experiences. The best chatbot that you currently can probably try out is tracking the pizza from Deliveroo or from Pizza Hut. That is a good chatbot case. Others, the moment it becomes too complex, will probably not be used, and as a result, not be engaged by the customer.
Great. And in terms of adoption, I think we're broadly seeing chatbot technology and conversational UX technology being adopted across many industries globally. And these range traditionally from customer service type assistants, all the way through to embedded aspects of service design. So if we think about where they've originally started out, it's more in terms of an assisted level of customer service interaction, either on a help desk or providing some kind of Q&A type capability. But increasingly, they're becoming much more sophisticated and actually embedded as parts of customer experience across multiple different channels, both within mobile app technologies, in terms of within web deployments, or even in standalone type chat interfaces distributed through social media type channels. And we see increasing examples of chatbot type technology being deployed across financial services, for example, providing the ability for customers to check their bank balance, even set up goals and track those goals, receive and have some kind of interaction with insights that are generated, and particularly look at offers that come off the back of those, and even making transactional execution through payments. And this ranges across markets and across industries. So whether it be within retail banking, all the way through to e-commerce, all the way through to other industries, whether it be telecoms or other. And it's certainly a growing market as well. We see rapid growth in the industry, with over 100,000 chatbots deployed on Facebook Messenger as of April 2017. And largely, these started out originally as driving cost optimization. So a lot of the initial drivers are around how do we provide 24/7 services to provide customer services, for example. But that's only one aspect of it. Certainly the customer service aspect is one, but increasingly we're looking more at how do we deliver increased customer engagement as well. And this adoption is accelerating. By 2018, we expect that over 2 billion people, or 80% of smartphone users, will be using messaging apps on their devices. And in terms of benefits, I've already spoken a little bit to some of those in terms of cost optimization, which is certainly one of the initial areas where lots of customers get involved with looking at deploying this type of technology. But we're increasingly looking at this as an increased form of customer engagement. So how do you deliver instant forms of communication with your consumer base, and how do you deliver that in a way which helps enhance that conversation, helps enhance that interaction? And the benefit of the technology is that it is available 24/7, and on the proviso that you have it on a scalable platform that's traditionally deployed in the cloud, you can scale that service offering out to grow with your business demand as well. And then looking ahead, I alluded to at the beginning, it's not, while we're focusing very much on trying to improve the customer engagement side of things, we also need to think back to the analytics which underpins this. And of course, they share a lot of the same core technologies. So how do you take knowledge about a customer, knowledge about their context, knowledge about their environment, and provide to them the best customer service that is contextually relevant for them in a way which is engaging? And this is increasingly where the market is going, which is the hook in with the cognitive capabilities of chatbots, with the deep analytics capabilities of machine learning and AI that underpins that. And if you can wrap all those things together and provide a compelling service to your customers, that is where we believe the value truly lies.
Yeah, it's a good point. So 100,000 bots, that obviously sounds quite intriguing, and we all love to build a new chatbot now. We do welcome that. We love playing with the technology and building true customer value, but the latter being the important thing. So we kind of see that businesses are very, very easily swept up in the hype of chatbots, and at times wanting to build for the sake of it. And kind of miss the realities of how chatbots work and really what role they should be playing in the customer's lives. So that's the overall CX, customer experience, and UX, user experience component that we want to consider prior to committing to new technology. put easily, customers don't really care how they interact with the company. They want to solve a problem, and they want to solve it quickly. That's the job. And that's if the bot can solve that job, then that's fantastic, and it's an excellent use case. But if not, then we need to reconsider whether it's the right product. In a nutshell, we want to figure out what the problem is that we want to resolve with the bot. We want to understand where it lives, i.e. what messaging platform. We'll have a server that we hook it up to, and then we have something running. So it's a technical issue, it's a technical difficulty, but also just as importantly, it is definitely an issue of user experience. And in the end, with my example saying track the pizza, we'll all be better off building a great bot if it's truly and meaningfully differentiated. So to get there, what we've done is we sort of put together what we call a Chatbot Blueprint. And the entire idea behind that is to engage in a 4 weeks sort of mission approach, that we call it. We work together with the proposition department that we have here in Deloitte Digital called Market Gravity. And what we want to do here is to actually not commit to full integration and build just yet, but rather have a very much low risk and rapid approach to designing and discovering the proposition itself first, i.e. that is very cost effective, but at the same time, we reduce risk because we know and validate with the real customers of your company whether such use case is useful. So you'll see various components on this slide, everything from sort of like what is the overall purpose to what content do we show. So what is it that we have as information, and where does it come from? What server, what APIs can we provide? But sort of the end-to-end that we would like to get across here is, A, we want to truly understand the customer, and we want to understand the market need for that particular person. B, we build out a detailed proposition blueprint, and that includes all the features, the overall experience, and the commercial impact for the business. And that is brought to life through rapid prototyping, which again is being tested. And then importantly, in the end, an MVP, a minimum viable product that has been iterated many, many times and tested with the customers. Of all the components that we see here on screen, they're all important. I would particularly highlight two. When it comes to proposition design, I think it always, it's the customer that stands in the middle and should be in the spotlight. Who are we building for? What's the frustration? What's the actual pain point? Again, always coming back to, let's not build for the sake of it, but let's actually resolve the problem. And what's quite fun when we've done chatbots in the past is, as an example, we have different personalities, right? So we have, say, the IT enthusiast who will absolutely try and break the bot in any way, in any way possible. There's people who are jokers. It doesn't really matter what you can do with the bot, but the first thing they will ask is, tell me a joke. And I think many of us have done that, say, with Siri or Alexa or the like. So that is very important to consider, and it's the reason why we do speak to customers so much. And secondly, then, make use of data, right? So we don't just speak to the customer for the sake of it, but of course, we also get their feedback. We iterate the product as a result, but we check metrics as well, right? So Chatbot is a fantastic way of additional data tracking and collation. It adds to the analytics, and Amazon Lexx is great for that, for having an additional monitoring dashboard and understanding the user better and better, and hence, as a result, making improvements over time to your overall customer experience, not just the product. So again, to sum this up, this is sort of how we would approach a sort of chatbot project. On the left side, you're looking at the proposition components where we test, learn, and iterate. And the focus here is it's fast, it's cross-sector. We work with cross-functional. We work with everyone within the teams, not just the marketing team, not just IT, but everyone from legal, compliance, from business to marketing, and so on. But it's fast, it's validated, and then from there, the middle ground where we have a validated use case, we then look into the actual integration with your server and with your components. So to sort of prove that a little bit better, we prepared a little demo focused on financial services, which Gareth will kindly introduce now, and then we'll look a little bit into the technology architecture behind that, as well as further case studies.
Great, thanks, Alex. So I think just before we jump into the demo, just wanted to give a little bit of context of how we came about to build this conversational UX chatbot and the rationale for it. So as Dan mentioned right at the beginning of the presentation, just about 12 months ago, actually, we were approached by one of our global FS clients who wanted us to help them build a next generation digital banking platform. And as you'd expect, the long list of capabilities was very long indeed, and it ranged from everything including open banking to PFM to goal setting and so on and so forth. But the one aspect which we looked at, which wasn't really being touched on very, very deeply at the time, was how do we change the customer interaction to be more conversational in nature, and how do we provide not just a traditional mobile banking app or desktop type platform, but something which was interactive and traveled with the customer. And one of the design goals we had was to provide a conversational user experience that would work both within a mobile app device and also outside of the app device, irrespective of what customer channel was a preference to the consumer, whether that be an interaction they wanted to drive through their messenger app or an interaction they wanted to drive through, Alexa sitting at home, and whether they want to make a transaction or make a query. So that became one of the key core aspects of that we started looking into. And as Dan mentioned, we were very fortunate to get an opportunity to work at very early stages with the Lexx team and with the engineering team directly on getting access to the beta technology set, and started to work to put together the componentry that would then take us through to live delivery, which is where we are today with one of those clients. So in terms of what I'll show you today, I'll just give you a very quick example of some of the genesis of where that piece of work took us. And as Dan alluded to, getting a demo up and running, we found was extremely quick in terms of velocity, albeit we did have some of our own assets to hand, which did help accelerate that. But let me just go into the demo itself. So as I mentioned, one of the key tenets of what we wanted to do was provide a chat capability which was agnostic of the particular channel. So for the purposes of this demo, I'll just be showing this through a Facebook Messenger interface. Again, this could be through any preferred media channel, or it could be through a custom interface of your own, or could be through an interface on a mobile device or a web browser or otherwise. But for today, it's just through Messenger. And the real drivers of what we're trying to do was to provide different levels of conversational context. So ones which were driven by consumer queries, and others which were driven by insights. So here I'll just give you two examples of consumer-driven interaction, and as you'll see through the dialogue for these two use cases, you also see some levels of insights-driven questions coming back as well. So the first one, I'll just go in and I'll say, hello to the chatbot to begin with. So hopefully you can all see the chatbot responding on the screen. And the first question I could ask them is just a transactional one, which is to say, what is my current balance, or what is my balance today? And here we see in the background the technology what we built on top of the AWS Lexx services going through and actually querying my transactional account and giving me a breakdown against what my different product holdings are, and responding with the response to that question. And then I can go through and I can carry on having a conversation to say, how much did I spend on takeaway, if you just want to query, and it will come back and give you some kind of categorization. Now, obviously in this context, we have a categorization engine working behind the background, but Lexx has been able to interpret that request, go back through our architecture and find that data set for us and come back. And as you can see, you can inject a little bit of humor into this as well. As Alex has alluded to, one of the key things is to make sure we aren't necessarily replicating human behavior one-to-one, but we do feel we need to give this some personality as well. And that personality could be driven by the particular segment you're looking at, or the particular type of consumer, or even their behavior. And the technology set allows us that flexibility to even adjust the way in which we engage with individual customers. So here I've had a response. I've spent £108 on Deliveroo, which is probably not what I was expecting to get back. Maybe I want to then ask a further question to say, how has this impacted my budget? Let's see if we can understand that. So here I can see a bit of a breakdown on my budget. That's overall, despite that expenditure, I'm actually on track, and I'm within my budget thresholds. And even I can go further and say, can you give me a breakdown of my spending? And again, I can get another interaction. So this is just an example of how we built one particular customer journey using the Lexx technology set. And deployed this onto AWS as a platform and routed it through to Facebook Messenger. And then just going on to a separate example, I can again query the chatbot and say, can I pay Alex Fritz? I think I'll probably owe him something for dinner the other evening, and here it'll ask me for recipient details. So I can go and I can add in Alex's details. Rest assured, these are dummy credentials for Alex on our test platform. So if you want to take the details, it's not going to impact them too much. And then I can say, well, I owe him £25.56, and that was for dinner. And then lastly, I have to implement a 4-digit one-time passcode just to confirm the transaction. And finally, just confirm and make confirmation of that payment. So I think these are just two examples of a conversational flow that we've implemented using Lexx. Obviously, the work we're doing more broadly on the customer engagement we're working on today covers a much broader set, ranging from advisory to transactional, and also just general engagement with consumers. But let's just jump forward then and look onto the technology architecture and talk a little bit about how we went about building this and some of the benefits we had with working through with the AWS Lexx technology set. Thank you very much. Okay, so in terms of how we went about building the tech architecture, as I mentioned, we wanted to build a broad platform which was agnostic of the particular channels we spoke to. I think you heard Dan mention it before about how various organizations are deploying technology in terms of microservices on their platform. And we went for a very similar approach in terms of how we build software, and that's very traditional these days in terms of modern digital architectures. So we went forward and we built an implementation which had a variety of different bespoke chat integration services for different chat channels. We then hooked that through to a set of generic chat services, and also customer and insight services, and action services, etc., and really integrated those with the Lexx toolkit. And what Lexx provides us with is a programming model and a toolkit for developing chatbots, where we can do a number of different things. We can manage the conversational models and the messaging. And again, through the technology that we built around that, we can then route that to different channels, manage that, and be able to manage the state, and also manage how we are switching between customer-initiated and insight-driven contexts. And we can also use the AWS stack to sort of embed the capability and extend with hooks into other technology stacks such as services via AWS Lambda and others. And this gives us some real benefits in terms of the technology stack itself. As Dan mentioned, we're able to get this initial version up and running within a matter of weeks in terms of getting the Lexx integration working. But more broadly, the benefits that we saw, and the reason we've been building on this platform, is the simplicity and the velocity that we get from working with AWS gives us, and also the growing range of capabilities gives us a huge amount of benefits, and allows us really to hook onto the back of a lot of the seamless deployment and scaling on demand capabilities that you get from a cloud provider. But that's just a very quick summary of the architecture. I won't go too much into the open banking side of things and how we use open banking APIs. That's really peripheral to what we're talking about here today. But I just really largely wanted to get the message over in terms of how we went about building this and some of the speed and velocity we got from working with the Lexx toolkit. Okay, and I think that brings us to the end of the technology section. I think we'll then move on to just giving a few other examples of some other implementations in the market that we've been working on. So just very quickly, an example of where we've used this type of technology before in other market contexts. So for a pharmaceutical client of ours, we built a chatbot interface, which was very much an assisted service to a purchase order management system. So what this allowed us to do was to provide an in-context mechanism for operators to query and to get help on how they would manage a purchase order process management flow. So whether that was in context in terms of helping them through the type of purchase orders that we're raising or responding to or invoicing against, that they had a contextual assistant that would help them with that process. And that worked across multiple geographies where the underlying business processes that were being served were all different. And what we were able to do was build a common platform that allowed us to service the different contexts in a different way. And that was just one example of how we've used that technology set in a different context. And then just moving on to the second example, we also worked on providing a retirement assistant. So looking at working for a life insurance company in the UK, we implemented a platform which allowed us to provide a Q&A mechanism to retail consumers, which allowed them to ask questions about their pensions plan and also about how they would then go about to draw down on their annuities. And that helped them through the entire process for how they would go about planning for a pension, Q&A about various different types of terminology, and also what would happen, downstream in terms of their plan and how that would work. So that's just an example of how you might look at deploying some of these types of capabilities within a few different types of contexts. So hopefully that's just given a bit of a flavor for what we've done in terms of implementing this technology set specifically for, in our use case, for an FS client in terms of customer engagement, and also just a few other examples of where we've done this before for other different clients in slightly different contexts. And I think that brings us to the end, and I'll hand back to Dan for Q&A.
That's great, guys. Thank you very much for that. So there's a couple of questions. We'll go through those now. Feel free, everyone else on the call, to type into the message window any other questions you may have. So let me go through the first one here. So this is from Jitendra. Hi, Jitendra. Your question was that you are seriously considering building chatbots, and you're currently evaluating platforms, including Lexx, Lewis, and Dialogflow. Due to our center of gravity towards Azure, Lewis is becoming more attractive. What can I tell management? Which is better, more efficient to help shift towards Lexx? Sorry if the question is out of line. No, it's not out of line at all. It's very polite of you. But I'll start on that one. And what I would say is a couple of things. Try Lexx out. You can start with the free tier. And on the free tier, you get 10,000 text requests and 5,000 speech requests per month for free for the first year. And then it's still very low cost after that. It's $4 for every 1,000 speech requests and 75 cents for every 1,000 text requests. I'd also have a look on our publicly referenceable customers as well. So there's some very satisfied, high-profile customers using Lexx successfully. We've got Capital One, we've got NASA, Vonage, Twilio, Slack, Liberty Mutual, the American Heart Association. And so there's some great customer stories there, and you can have a look on the website at those. And then also just think about the power of the deep learning technology that's behind Lexx. So it's the same technology already used for Alexa, which is incredibly successful. It's using established natural language understanding and automatic speech recognition. And also, it's ironic, I'm sitting in a fulfillment center in Luton today, and I've just had a tour of the fulfillment center. I've seen the robots circulating the factory, moving all the items around, using computer vision. And what I'm trying to say here is that deep learning and AI is something we've been doing within Amazon for a very long time. And in fact, one of the first AI-related products was back in 1997, making recommendations on the choice of books, depending on what you were reading. We're surrounded by AI within Amazon, so it's a real area of expertise for us. And then the other thing I'd say as well is think about the integration with all other services. So if you think about recognition for visual analysis, Poly to convert text into speech, there's all those use cases, and we also have the deep learning AMI. So within the frameworks of our AI stack, you can basically start up with a deep learning AMI that has a huge range of frameworks bundled with that AMI, so things like MXNet or TensorFlow or Cafe2. It's about providing the right framework for the type of activity that you're undertaking. So there's a huge range of choice there. And I'd also think about the pace of innovation. So going back to the start of the presentation, I think we spoke about over 1,400 significant service releases in 2017. Things are progressing extremely quickly. And we listen to our customers, we listen to what they are asking for, and that's how we develop our products. It feeds into the new features. I'll hand over to the Deloitte guys. Is there anything you want to add from your perspective on why you would choose Lexx as the platform?
I think, I'll be completely honest. I haven't used Lewis and Anger, but I think certainly the experience we had with working very early on with yourselves, Dan, and it's been impressive to see how much more sophisticated the product has become since then. Is, in our experience, we had a very rapid challenge to build a prototype in a very short space of time, and we found using the Lexx toolkit to be, I wouldn't say very straightforward to use necessarily, because that makes it sound simplistic, and there are certainly lots of rich tools available in there. But we found the ability to use the tools to get something delivered very quickly was very important to us, but also in a way which we're familiar with in terms of providing standard, web API endpoints that we could interact with. And generally, the toolkit around it was very user friendly in the sense that we could get one of our engineers who had not worked with conversational UX or worked with NLP before to actually just go through with some support from the AWS team in terms of guidance around how to best get the best out of the package. And we were able to turn our first demo around literally within a few weeks. And that was, for us, that gave us a lot of confidence in terms of working with the platform. We certainly have a lot of experience with other vendors as well. And it very much depends on what you're trying to achieve. And we just found that the power of the Lexx toolkit and also the availability of the platform and the support around it to be very compelling. And as Dan says, I think I would just recommend giving it a bit of a spin, try it out for yourself, and just take away from it what you will.
That's great. Thanks very much, Gareth. Okay, so another one that's come through. From my experience, bots can't even understand the most basic commands or responses.
Yeah, I think I'll take that. I think, so as I said, right, it's a novel technology, and I think that's something we have to keep in mind. I'm not sure if I fully agree either, because with 100,000 Facebook chatbots as an example being in place, you have to imagine that a lot of them are also legacy products, and a lot of innovation has been happening in the past few months. But yeah, the fact is that natural language processing and machine learning and AI, all the good stuff, is still improving, and you have to consider that. But at the same time, then it is important for businesses to start experimenting and investing with that technology, because otherwise I think we're sort of left behind very quickly. So that is the whole point of why I said in the beginning, let's keep it simple, or KISS, because if we keep it simple with a very simple proposition, then we can build on top of that, and that will ensure that the bot will understand indeed the questions for a particular use case, and the expectation is not given to the user that particular bot can resolve everything. There's also a few nitty-gritty things. So we like to remove any dead ends. So make it very clear to the user that they have reached a dead end, that the bot can't help in that particular case. And this is really where UX comes in. So every time we sort of take a project, we definitely take a UX designer with us, because it's quite important to consider these aspects. I mentioned, sense of humor, current affairs, weather, it's all the good stuff to sort of integrate there as well, which helps. So even if I don't understand the particular question or command, actually adding a little bit of sense of humor adds to the overall experience, makes it engaging, and therefore makes the customer come back, hopefully in a few weeks' time, months' time, when the technology may have improved. And then lastly, very specifically, do have a fallback. So we're not saying that chatbots are replacing everything that's currently already in place. There is definitely, and still, and for a long time, will be a need for human beings, i.e. customer support, that can answer questions that are possibly more complicated than what a chatbot can do. So provide us a fallback and use a chatbot rather as a sort of introduction to resolving a problem. If you can't fully solve it, there will be somebody else who can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alexander. So another question come through from Ranjit. Does AWS offer tools for chatbot analytics, e.g. customer inquiries which went unanswered? So we do have monitoring that's built in. So you can track the metrics, basically. You have a monitoring dashboard on the console. And you can look at things like the number of missed utterances, the latency, things that weren't recognized as well. So you can see how how users are interacting with the bot, and then look to make improvements based on that information. So there is that built-in analytics. We also have one.
I think, Dan, just while you're looking, I think that's so important what you just said, right? So again, Chatbot is not a standalone solution, but rather an addition to your current and existing analytics platform. Mm-hmm. It's yet another channel to be used, and I think it should be part of the overall customer experience, not by itself. So it's quite useful for that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, Alexander. And so this question was from Mansour Malik. Is it possible to integrate the AI chatbot with an existing knowledge-based system for troubleshooting and customer support? Yes, it is. We have, for example, Freshdesk. They provide customer support, and they're using Lexx for this purpose. Guys, is there anything that you'd add on to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this is traditionally a very typical use case where organizations who are looking to deploy this type of technology start out on, and they typically start out on a knowledge-based platform or an FAQ type system where a lot of the challenges is just getting the chatbot, just getting the chatbot up and running and contextually into their organization. So the focus is very much on how do we start off with a relatively simple challenge in terms of getting the context right and the customer engagement right, and rolling the technology out against what tends to be a relatively fixed set of questions and answers, but also making sure that's tuned and that's managed in the right way, because ultimately this is a new type of technology and a new type of experience for consumers as well. So there's lots of other things that you need to think about when deploying it. So typically that's a typical example on where to start out on. I think there's a subsequent question there on do the chatbots forget and start over from scratch? Do they have memory? I don't know if you want to answer that one first, Dan, or shall I have a crack at that one?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that in terms of, I'm trying to think of the use case of needing to forget, because obviously the idea is that we're using deep learning frameworks and we're learning from the information that we've received. So I'm wondering what use case that would be.
Yes, I think, I mean, I'm not sure of the specific context here, but we certainly have a similar scenario where we're effectively working on how do we build a platform which learns about customer engagement and customers' behavior themselves, and in that context, the conversational chatbot that we have that we're currently working on has a degree of memory associated with it. So it doesn't, it learns based on the trends that are relatively current within a specific window of time, and we do that by using an underlying recurrent neural network, which allows us to think about what's contextually happening in the present tense, where the present tense is a period of time that you might set. So I think, yes, I mean, it depends on the circumstance, and it depends on whether it depends on how the learning algorithms work under the hood, and depends on what level of memory retention you want to apply to it. But I think answering it in more detail beyond that probably goes beyond the scope of this session, but it probably goes more into the sort of machine learning, classical machine learning techniques.
Sure, thanks, Gareth. So another one, which AWS regions support Lexx? At the moment, it's just US East 1 and EU West 1. So that's Ireland and Northern Virginia. But I'm sure if you're familiar with AWS, you'll know that will progress extremely quickly as well. How is it different from Alexa Skills Kit? So Alexa Skills Kit is used to essentially build skills for use with Alexa devices like the Echo, whereas Amazon Lexx, although based on Alexa technology, is purely designed for bots that support both voice and text. And the idea is that it enables developers to be able to deploy those across mobile and messaging platforms as well. Languages, in terms of languages, it's currently only US English that is supported. But again, as with our other services, that will develop quickly as well, and that's based on customer demand. So all of these services, we create these services based on the customer feedback. So if you feed back to us a need for specific languages, then that feeds back into our internal system to develop that as a priority. I'm sorry that we haven't had time to do all of the questions. We've hit the hour now, so I'd just say thank you ever so much for your time. Thanks, Gareth and Alexander from Deloitte as well. That would really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you may be.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.